מי שברך אבותינו.
Leah, thank you so much for joining me here. I know this is beyond your comfort zone, and what I'm seeing from all of Avigail's friends is how humble they are. So humble, and at the same time, they're willing to do things out of their comfort zone in memory of Avigail. Hakarat tov to Avigail. So I'm very grateful that you're here with me. I spoke to you for a few minutes before, and you were sharing such nuggets of gold of Avigail with such enthusiasm. And I said, let's capture this and share it with the family members, because I didn't know Avigail as well as you did, but your enthusiasm was contagious. And I said, can you imagine everybody else hearing this that knew her so well? It would be as if they're having a conversation, having Avigail in the room. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to introduce you. You knew Avigail from back in the day, 30-something years ago.
Yeah. I was at Midrashet Moriah when I met her.
Right. So you were a student there, right?
I was a student there, and she was my madricha.
When you were sharing with me before, you said that you became like a chavruta to her.
You know, after we spoke, I went to go find a few things that I had. I think Abigail described our friendship best. I'm reading now from the first she got me before I went back to America after my year and a half learning in Israel. And she wrote me a beautiful inscription, and she signed it, Ba'ava Rab Avigail Goim, Chavertech v'hachavruta shelach, Abigail. And I think that really very well encapsulates the relationship that we had. She was a friend and also a chavruta. She was, I think, 6 years older than me, 7 years older than me. And so she was just a larger than life role model. And on the one hand, she was my chavruta, and we learned together a lot. And on the other hand, she was my wacky, adventurous friend, dragging me along for all of her activities and really just bringing me into her world and her life. That was really a gift.
You described that so beautifully. How did you first decide when you came to Midrashet Moriah? How did you know that she will be somebody that you want to learn with?
It's funny. I told you last summer I spent some time at my parents' home back in New Jersey, and my mom had packed up all these things before they moved, and in there was a box and a whole bunch of letters. And I just came across recently, a year ago, a whole bunch of correspondence that I had with Abigail after I came back from my time in Israel, and we kept in touch by letter. And she actually wrote about it. She said, do you remember that time when we became friends at our first tish together in Gush Katif? It was the first Shabbaton at Midrashet Moriah, where they took us to Gush Katif for Shabbat. And we sat and we had our first tish together. And that's when we clicked. And I think that Abigail was this dichotomy of tremendous intellect that was balanced with this very spiritual side. Everything was about, she used to call me her Rebbe, and I was her chassid, and she used to say I was her Talmud, but I was very much her chassid, and intellectual and spiritual and very serious with very real values, and at the same time so funny and so much fun and such a great sense of humor. To hear the way she would write about everything and listen to how she lived her life. She was fun, but just so straight, so yeshara, so about. And I think that's part of her love for Torah. That was it. It was about truth. It was about spirituality. And I was very blessed to have that with her. My time in Israel with her as a chavruta, she began her master's degree in Tanakh, and she was studying a course in Parshanut. And so our chavruta were always about whatever it was that she was learning. And that's what we studied. And I remember she used to say to me, okay, if you're serious about learning Tanakh, teaching Tanakh, if you're serious about it, Rashi, Breshit Gimel Chet, you have to know that Rashi by heart. The first Rashba in Mishpatim, you have to know that by heart. Anyone who's serious about it knows that by heart. Of course you have to know it by heart. And then later she'd say, so, did you learn it? I want to hear it. Did you learn it? And I'd have to repeat it back, of course. So much of what I know, I knew because of Abigail. And it's something that continued even after I left Midrashet. It's funny, I remember she had written to me, if you're serious about Tanakh and you're serious, there is this, you have to get the book, the Perishot Shel Rashi by Necham Leibowitz and Moshe Aaron, you have to have it. And I said to her, I'm like, where am I going to get that from? She said, I'm going to get it to you, but that's something you have to have on your shelf. You have to get it. It's called Yunim B'Shitato Shel Rashi, and you have to have it. And sure enough, a few weeks later, it was brought to me in the Stern dorm by one of the girls who was coming back. Here it is. She said, this is something you have to have. If you're serious, you have to have it. And everything was like that. One of her letters, when she was talking about becoming a To'enet Beit Din, and she was very torn about stopping her studies at Bar-Ilan in Tanakh to start spending time on being a To'enet Beit Din. She wrote, anyways, it's a letter from her. She wrote, anyway, some major change has been going on in my life, such as I might be leaving Tanakh for a while and going into Mishpat Ivri, or to be more exact, in taking the courses for being a To'anot Rabbaniyot. Maybe that is if I decide not to go to Bar-Ilan this year. I really need to talk to you to try to decide. And she ended it. She wrote a little bit more, and then she ended it with, hope you enjoy this article by Ephraim Kishon, Ba'ava Rabbah. And then enclosed in the letter, she would send me an article.
And you kept it.
Whatever it was that she was doing. Oh. And I think it was 2 summers later when she was studying for her tests, that became our chavrita. Our chavrita was in Even HaEzer, and I was introduced to learning the Birkei Yosef and the Beit Shmuel. Like, it was new for me, and that was whatever it was that she was doing. That became our chavrita. I said, Abigail, I'm here for a month. Are we learning? She said, yeah, but this is what we're learning, and that's what we learned. And that was the learning side of her.
Did you keep in touch through handwritten letters all the years? She's showing me all these letters.
No, not all the years. There weren't so many years. I think that she got married, I think, a few months before me, 1995, right?
I don't know. She was young. She was very young.
I think she got married a few months before me. And I think that we stayed in touch, and after we were both married and I was living in the States, I think we had lost touch. But just to give you how funny she was, this letter, it starts off, Dear Leah, but if you can see, the name is crossed out. And then she writes in parentheses, I actually started writing this letter to someone else, but then I realized that you come first, but I couldn't waste a piece of paper. So she just crossed out the name and then continued the letter to me. And on the same time,
that is hysterical.
And at the same time, this is the Yamim Noraim are over, and I still feel on such a spiritual high. She wrote to me about her studies being a To'enet Beit Din and what that was like for her. And she wrote, I enjoy very much the learning, and most of the topics being studied revolve around Dinei Gittin, Dinei Kiddushin, being that all of Inyanei has to go through the Beit Din. I find it incredible to be able to open up the Gemara, not just for the sake of Drosh V'Kabel Sachar, but rather to learn how to reach Psak Halacha. Most of the women in class are over the age of 35. She was such a pioneer. Most of the women in the class are over the age of 35, very accomplished, and at times I feel very humble around them, especially when topics such as divorce cases are discussed. I think to myself, how can I say what I think about this case of divorce when I don't even know anything about marriage? And then, of course, she sent me a recording of the lecture that I could listen to it and be a part of it.
Leah, it shows that she thought so highly of you. She respected you. If she shared all of this with you, I feel like you were a part of her partner in her journey and her joy of sharing her journey.
She had such an impact on my life, both as a chavrita and as a friend, the person to consult with when I was dating. I think a year before I got married, my not yet Chatan, but I was in Israel this summer, and we overlapped. He came for Ella's mom. We overlapped for a week, and one of the first people I had to bring him to was Abigail, make sure my Rebbe approved. And at the same time, where there was all of this wonderful learning going on, Leah, you have to see what the Shuk Arba Minim looks like in Mea Sharim. There's nothing like it. Let's go. And there we were. The next thing I knew, I was in middle of total mayhem in Mea Shearim. And I'm going to my house to go pick something up. Come, you'll meet my sister. We just ran to our house. We'd go, who lives right opposite me? Rabbi Chanoch Teller lives right opposite me. Come, let's go knock on the door and say hello.
Yes.
Everything was just, come, let's go. Where are we going? We're going to have a chavaya. Where are we going? I don't know. Let's walk to the Kotel. I don't know. We're walking to Berman's Bakery. Oh, where are we going? Everything was just fly, go. It was fun. It was exciting. My Shana Bet year, I went to my very first protest with her regarding the Oslo Accords. It's my first time being at an Israeli protest, and that left quite a mark. And they were very turbulent times, much like today. And I think that part of what's so missing is leadership that has such yoshra, such a clear moral compass of what's right and what's wrong. And I think that was a big part of the impetus in her becoming a Toanet Betin, is to be able to properly represent people who need representation and aren't getting it, but doing it through Torah. And she was passionate about everything she did, whether it was learning or it was having fun. She was so passionate about everything that she did. And she was such a people person, even though she used to joke around that she wasn't. She was such, look at all the connections that she made with everyone. She touched everyone. She accepted everyone, but she never compromised who she was, ever. She was just this whirlwind. And I think that being in a time where women's Torah learning was really in its early stages, she was very much ahead of her time and so learned and so knowledgeable. And we always used to joke how women's learning, it happened behind desks, but she felt like the yeshiva experience was missing from our lives. That was something that we needed. She actually, she also had a very special relationship with Rav and Mrs. Tabori also. And Mrs. Tabori, who I'm still very close with. And we would go there for Shabbat. And one of the letters she wrote to me was right after spending a Shabbat there. And we were thinking of creating a summer program at the Gush for girls to learn on a high, serious, and what do you think? Do you think that would work? And it was always about building and trying to create and to do something. We lost touch very shortly after we were both married. When we first got married, we spent time in Washington Heights, and I made Aliyah ultimately from Tanakh. I spent a Shabbat with her. She actually was in the States for Midrashet, and I spent Shabbat with her. She was for a friend's Shabbat Kala. And I remember we actually stayed together in the same house, so we really spent Shabbat together. And I remember that she was struggling when looking at all of us. We were a group of young women who returned from our Shana Bet year in Israel. And in our relationships. And I remember she said, "You're all so comfortable here. I feel like all of that Eretz Yisrael, Torah Yisrael, that's it. Like you girls come, and then what happens?" And actually, we all ended up making Aliyah. It took us some time, but our whole little chavra ended up here in Israel. And we're all still very much in touch with each other. And I think that with time, she really got to see so many of her students come back to make Aliyah and live in Israel. And I think that was something that was also very special for her. And I think that she began to see the importance of the community in the States and the influence that the time that we spent in Israel had on all of our lives. And she invested in that. And so much of that is hers, both in terms of the homes that we created and where we chose to live our adult lives. A lot of that is her. Bizchuta.
V'shavu banim legvulam. When did you rekindle with her again?
I have to say that it pains me a lot now that I didn't. She gave a shiur in Modi'in every week, but I was teaching, so it wasn't one that I could attend. She spent a Shabbat as a guest speaker with her husband, and I saw her here. And there was one year where I was teaching a course in Matana Poupko, and she was the teacher who taught after me. Occasionally, we'd catch each other as I was leaving and she was coming, but we were both very busy, and it's a huge, I really feel it's tremendous fisfus that I didn't keep up. I reached out to her a couple of times when I needed her, when a dear friend of mine was going through a divorce, And I thought that she needed help, and I thought that Avigail could be that person to help her, and she was. And beyond that, it was really just very casual when we bumped into each other, very casually, or sending regards through people. But we were not very much in touch at all after I was in Israel.
It sounds like you had an ahavat nefesh. Sometimes you have friends that make a real, I want to say, mark on the heart. And even though you're not in touch, you're with them all the time. And no matter where you meet them, if it's 10, 15, 20 years later, you could pick up the same emotional connection.
Absolutely. I think she got a big kick out of the fact that she was coming in to teach right after I finished. I think she thought that was hilarious, and we both did. And I think that just so much, the guy was just made up of so many different parts and so many different pieces. And we always said she was a closet gushnik. Closet. She belonged in the Beit Midrash at the Gush, but she really just had, again, funny like anything, but at the same time, such a deep sensitivity and understanding of people. But you can never feel sorry for yourself. Everything was just, so get up and do something about it. Okay, you got it off your chest. Great. Now, so Mousim, I think that was very much, that was who she was, as Mousim. And
there was no sheve al taseh by her.
No. And she took advantage of everything that was around her. She really just enjoyed and learned. And I think that we were in touch during a period of time in her life where she was dating. A lot has been written about some of those dates. And I think that one of the last letters I got from her was a picture of her and her husband, their wedding. And also when she was really just trying to figure out which direction she was going to go in teaching Tanakh, teaching, being a Toinet Beit Din, she was really trying to sort all of those pieces out. She went from being a madricha at Midrashet to being a teacher at Midrashet, and that was also a process. When I was there, she was a madricha, and she wrote to me, it's very hard because I teach classes, and then I go upstairs to the dorm with the girls. And when her time of after she finished doing that, when she moved back home, and what an adjustment that was to be living back home again, and then the teaching was able to take on more of a role. I think that the unique thing that I feel that I was so blessed with was that I was blessed to have her as a teacher, but because it was really at the beginning part of her journey, it was also able to be a friendship and have a closeness to it that I don't think could have existed years later when she was the giant that she was. I think that being able to be part in that very beginning stage was really what helped me have that chavertech v'chavrutatech. I was very blessed to have both in my life.
Yeah, wow. You really described her so masterfully. And it is a treasure. And sometimes people come into our life, and even if like our lives get very busy, we go back to those moments and the yedidut nefesh that never ends. And it sounds from the stories that you share, that she really cherished your relationship. To go and write these in-depth letters for somebody that went back to America and she's in Israel and processing, that takes a lot. And that I feel it says a lot about you. And now that I get to speak to you, I see. I said this a few times in the interviews, and I really see that her friends and the people that she surrounded herself were very mindful and she knew who to surround herself with. While she was humble, she also knew who to attract and who to invest in. And it says a lot about you.
I think that for me, it was just, she wasn't a peer. I was several years younger than her. And the fact that I feel like she took such an interest in me and was such a part of my spiritual and personal growth was really just something that I very much treasure.
You mentioned that she took you to one of Nechama Leibowitz's shiurim, right? Tell us about that.
It was hilarious. She's like, come, we're going. I was like, where are we going? She said, we're going to a shiur. I said, okay, off we go. And it was on What's a shiur. And I remember being completely shell-shocked. I didn't understand how it worked. I'm in this room with people of all ages. And I think that part of it was about being exposed to but also about seeing the way that she taught, because I was in a place in my life where I was going to leave Israel and I was going to go back to college, and what do I want to be when I grow up? And I had all kinds of ideas, and then I was toying with part of teaching. And I remember asking a question, and this middle-aged woman in a tichel starts, everybody's writing, nobody's answering, everybody's writing in a notebook, runs up to her and shows her answer. And I did not understand what was going on. The question was asked, everybody's writing, and one of the people are going up and showing, she's giving them feedback on their answer. And the idea was that if one person says the answer, then nobody else has to think in the room. If you hadn't yet figured it out, or somebody else answers the question and they answered it correctly, then you're done having to think it through. And by this process, everybody has to think independently, and everybody got their feedback. And I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on in the room. And I remember Abigail just laughing at me because I was so shell-shocked. And at one point, there was a question on the Ramban, and she turned to me, and I was so flustered, I couldn't even give an answer. And Abigail just thought that was the funniest thing in the world.
That experience. Did she share with you her ahava to Nechama Leibowitz and why I think she chose her as one of her morot derech and mentors?
I think that Nechama Leibowitz, being such a poetic derech in the world of Torah, of women's learning, was something that was so admirable. She used to go tell me, if you're serious about Torah, you have to have this book. If you're serious about learning, you have to have this book. If you're serious about Tanakh, you have to have this book. And that was one of the first things that she said to me, that you have to have Pirush Rashi LaTorah Yunim B'Shitato by Nechama Leibowitz and Moshe Aaron. That was the first, it's a 2-volume book. You have to have it. I think that these were role models for her. Mm-hmm. These were role models for her. And I think that for many years, women who wanted to learn Torah seriously learned Torah seriously from Rebbeim. We learned Torah seriously from men.
Right.
And in that respect, Avigail, Yael, they turned, that was a time where these women really stepped forward and picked up the mantle and were really forerunners of women's Torah learning for women, by women. And that was unbelievable. That was really magical.
What part of Avigail do you try to incorporate into your life?
That's such a great question. I think that there are different parts and different periods of my life. I think that there were times where the intellectual aspect of learning was front and center. I think that as I've gone through different stages in life, the more spiritual part of it becomes front and center. And I think that friendship with her was always everything. Emet and Yosher. There was the laughter, there was the fun, there was the adventure, there was the learning. But Emet and Yoshra, those really were the way I would describe her. And I think that's something that I hope to aspire to.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. You said she gave you a book before you went back to America, Sefer.
Yeah. So before I went back to America, she had bought me a Parashat Meshech Chachma HaTorah, and she inscribed it very beautifully. And of course, first in Hebrew.
Are you willing to share it?
Sure. אמרו חכמים שכל היגע בתורתו בבית המדרש לא במהרה הוא משכח, וכל היגע בתלמודו בצנעה מחכים, שנאמר בעת צנועים חוכמה. הלכות תלמוד תורה, the Rambam, פרק ג' הלכה י"ב. ברוך שזכינו ללמוד איתך במשך שנה זו וללמוד לימך. מהי כוונת זו המובאת אל ברמב"ם? יהי רצון שנזכה במהרה בימינו ללמוד ביחד שוב. חדש ימינו כקדם.
וואו, יש לי דמעות.
באהבה רבה וגעגועים, חברתך והחברותא שלך אביגיל. And in English she wrote to my yeshiva bacher. Hope to see you come back to our yeshiva. We'll give you a shiur to teach. for you're a true inspiration to all the Talmidim. You're a Talmid with Simchat Chaim and full of thrill in learning Torah. Keep that chassid part in you while in Galut. Tish once in a while could never hurt, or just a little tance on a regular Thursday night. But don't forget, you must have Shrayim. You have the Rebbe's bracha b'chol asher tilchi. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuya b'avar b'Avigail. Yael and I still haven't decided who will be the Rav and who will be the Rebbe. Ma nirah lech? She's referring to Yael.
Wow. I'm speechless. Speechless. איזה זכות.
ממש.
Really.
ממש היה.
איזה זכות. I'm going to say it again, that I believe that she chose wisely. And I'm sure she's smiling as you read that out. And she's proud of you. I'm sure she's proud of you. And I'm grateful that you gifted us, as much as you were hesitant. But I'm grateful that you shared another piece of Avigail with us. Do you remember what you told me? Why? Sorry. You remember what you said, why you were hesitant to record?
I want to make sure that I do justice to who she was as a friend and as a teacher. And I miss her. Miss her very much.
I think you did justice. I think she's proud of you. And I think she's grateful. Because Hakarat Tov is one of the things that she was her very much her personality. And somebody that wrote such intimate parts of her journey with you, it means that she has Hakarat Tov to you. So I'm sure she's grateful that you shared a piece of the relationship with her family. And I'm honored to have met you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And may her family have nechama. She is who she is because of the home that she grew up in.
That's true. May her neshama have an aliyah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
לכי כי אם לא אזכרך